Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you. Open my eyes, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Please open my eyes. Open the eyes of my heart. 'Cause I want to see you. I want to see you. To see you high and lifted up, shining in the light of your glory.
So let us now go to our next lesson for this evening. In line with the previous discussion we had about the certain topic, examining the traditions and doctrines of men, wherein we need to study those things that we are practicing today, if they are according to the will of the Father or they are in the Bible. So we need to study these things, especially the doctrines that arises today. We need to make sure that our salvation is pure, and this is what the Father or what our God wants us to do. So in order for us to rightly divide the word of truth, we need to thoroughly and carefully study the words of the Bible. So let us consider this passage when Titus, in chapter 2, verse 1, he said, "But speak thou the things which become sound doctrine." So we are only allowed to speak and to teach all those sound doctrines that we can find in the Bible. We are not allowed to add our opinions or add our our perceptions in certain things, but we need to always consult what the Bible say. In the last study about the papacy or the Roman Catholic doctrine, we have established certain facts or certain truth according to the Bible, wherein we established that the foundation of the church was laid upon the prophets and the apostles, not to Peter only. And also we have established that the church was already established on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. So there's no other church anymore to be established today. The Bible is sufficient and complete, and there is no need for substitutions from the popes of what has been written in the Bible. So those are the facts that we have established prior to our previous study. Now let us consider another thing, which is we need to study it so that we know how to deal with those things or with these things. So our next lesson for this evening is about the papacy of Apostle Peter. So examining the doctrines and traditions of men, let us examine the papacy of Apostle Peter. Was it from heaven or was it from men? According to James Cardinal Gibbons, who was Archbishop of Baltimore, stated the dogma as follows. The Catholic Church teaches also that our Lord conferred on St. Peter the first place of honor and jurisdiction in the government of his whole church, and the same spiritual supremacy has always resided in the popes or bishops of Rome as being the successors of St. Peter. Consequently, to be true followers of Christ, all Christians, both among the clergy and laity, must be in communion with the See of Rome, where Peter rules in the person of his successors. It was taken from Gibbons, The Faith of the Father, 110th Revised Edition, in page 78. So according to this statement, James Cardinal Gibbons is testifying about the papacy or supremacy of Apostle Peter, and that he was saying or telling us that he should have his successors. And all the clergy, when we say clergy, meaning those are the persons who are assigned for a religious responsibilities. And all the laity, maybe I suppose they are the normal people, must be in communion with the See of Rome. So they must be in the overseeing or under the care of the Rome. To adhere to this statement, we need to prove three things. First, Apostle Peter was a pope. Second, Peter has to have a successor. Third, the bishops of Rome were to be his successors. So we need to prove these three things from that statement. And then they go reading the book of the Gospel according to Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, wherein it says, "And I say also to thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So this was Jesus talking to Peter, wherein he said to Peter, according to them, he said to Peter, "And that you are Peter, and upon you, Peter, I will build my church." That's how they translated, or that's how they interpreted the words of the Lord in this particular passage. They are referring that Peter and the rock were the same. So the foundation of the church was laid upon Peter, and that Jesus made him the leader of among the apostles and among his churches. That's how they interpreted this passage. And then they go to Luke chapter 22, verse 32, wherein it says, "But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren." So this is again Jesus talking to Peter, wherein he said he prayed for Peter that his faith should not fail, but when he will return to him, Jesus, he should strengthen his brethren. Again, so they made this, or they are basing their dogma in this passage, wherein they said Jesus set Peter as the leader of the apostles, or the leader of the churches. So from this statement, see, Jesus preserved Peter for this office. That's what they are claiming. Let us read more from their claims about the papacy of Apostle Peter, wherein the claim to papal infallibility is based upon four assumptions. So, being a pope, there is this what they call being infallible. So, if you are a pope, you are infallible, meaning you are preserved from errors. So whatever things you say, whatever dogma you are to say, whatever doctrines or additions you are to say, people, all the church will accept it because you are preserved from errors. So the claim for papal infallibility is based on four assumptions. First, that Peter had a primacy over the other apostles. The first pope, that Peter was prominent in the early days of the church, no one can deny, and that he had the authority over the other apostles. Second, that Peter was Bishop of Rome. Third, that Peter passed on to the bishops of Rome his powers. And fourth, that we have a true line of successions from Peter to the present Roman bishop. Now, what does the Bible say about these things? Let us go back at the book of Matthew chapter 16, verse 18, wherein we read it as this way. "And I say also to thee, that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So again, like what I told you before, in order for us to understand a certain passage in the Bible, we need to learn the context of the passage. We need to read more about the passage. What is it referred to, or who is it for, or what it is it for? Let us read more. So let's start reading from verse 13 to 14, wherein it says, "When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" So in verse 14, "So they said, Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." So the situation here is Jesus was asking his disciples about him, about who he was. So he asked his disciples, "What do men say who I am?" And then his disciple replied and said, "Oh, they say you are John the Baptist. Some are saying that you are Elijah. Oh, no. Some are saying you are Jeremiah. And the others are saying you are one of the prophets. And so, if we are going to continue reading in verse 15 and 16, he then turned to them and said, "But who do you say that I am?" So he finally asked them about their faith, or about how they know Jesus. So he finally turned to them and said, "Who do you say that I am?" And among the disciples, Peter being the most aggressive and bold among them, so he replied in verse 16, Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So he proclaimed that Jesus Christ was the Christ and the Son of the living God. And so, reading in verse 17, Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven." Now let's go to verse 18. "And I say also to thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." So what does this passage really mean? Let us scrutinize, let us study about this passage. So the Bible tells us about three things in this passage, wherein Peter, if we are going to study the Greek word, because remember, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew and Aramaic, and the New Testament was written in Greek. So let us consult the Greek word of the name Peter, where in Greek it means Petros, meaning a small rock. It is a small rock or stone, meaning it is movable. You can see it on the paveway or pathway. So that is the meaning of Peter, Petros, which is small rock or stone. And rock in Greek, it was translated as Petras. It refers to a cliff or a big rock, so meaning it is unmovable because it is a cliff or a big rock. So these are the differences between the two. Petros is just a small stone, while Petras is a cliff or a rock, so meaning it's unmovable. So this rock was referred to Christ. He was referring to himself when he said, "Upon this rock I will build my church." This rock, which Peter had confessed, if you remember in the previous verses, he said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter confessed that the rock is the Christ and the Son of the living God, which Peter had known. "This is what I know about you. You are the Christ, you are the Son of the living God." And this is the faith which Peter confessed in him, or to Christ. "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." So this rock is the Christ. This rock is the Son of the living God. When Jesus said that upon this rock I will build my church, he was referring to himself as the rock. So thus, Christ the rock, where the church has to be built on. So when he said, "I will build my church," it was built upon Christ, not upon Peter. So when he said, "I will build my church," this church will be his, not Peter's. When we say church, that belongs to Christ, so Church of Christ, not church belong to Peter, so that we call it Church of Peter. But no, that's not the thing. It belongs to Christ, so that is his church. Different translation of these passages. Let us try to compare. In Greek, I'm not good in pronouncing words in Greek, but this is what was written in the translation of Greek. "So Petros kai epe tauta ta Petra." So if you notice, the Greek translation used two different distinct words, Petros and Petra. In Latin Vulgate, they use "to es Petros et sopre hanc Petram." They use two distinct words again, Petros and Petram. The Catholic Confraternity, wherein they translated also the Greek into "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock." Peter and rock, two different distinct words. King James Version, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock." And American Standard, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock." Now let us expound it more. So Petros in Greek word is the masculine gender of the word, Petros. Petras is the feminine gender of the word, Petra. So there are two different distinct words. Where in King James Version, they translated two different words also, which is Peter and rock. And also in Matthew chapter 16, if we are going to analyze it using the English grammar, wherein they used thou, which is thou is a second person, second personal pronoun, and this is a third personal demonstrative pronoun. So when he said thou, he was referring to Peter. Thou art Peter. And when he said this, he was referring into something or to himself. This as the third demonstrative pronoun. He was demonstrating something like this Bible. So upon this rock, I will build my church. So these are two different words. Additional passages wherein that testifies about Peter isn't the head of the church. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20, we have read this on the previous study. Having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstones. So if Peter was the head of the church, it should have been translated as this: having been built on the foundation of the apostles, and as Peter being the chief cornerstone. But no, it was Jesus Christ as the chief cornerstone. So it wasn't Peter, and it wasn't the foundation of the church wasn't laid upon him only, but upon the apostles, all the apostles and the prophets. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 18, and he is the head of the body, the church, who is in the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that all things might have the preeminence. So if Apostle Peter was the head of the church, it should have been translated as this: as Peter, the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning. But no, this passage, Apostle Paul refers it to Christ, to Jesus being the head of the church, not Peter, but Christ. So he is the head of the body. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 11, for no other foundation can anyone lay than what is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So there's no other foundation that was laid aside from Jesus Christ. So these passages testify or do not testify about the papacy or the supremacy of Apostle Peter. Luke chapter 22 verse 32, they're using it. Oh, how about Luke chapter 22 verse 32, wherein Jesus preserved him for leadership amongst the apostles in the church? Well, let us study. But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. Again, let us try to read again the context. So Luke chapter 22 verse 32, starting from verse 31, it says, and the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat. So he was talking to Simon Peter, and he was telling Peter that Satan asked for him, that his faith will turn as wheat. But in verse 32, but I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. So why did Jesus said this to Peter? The reason is, Peter in verse 33, being certain on his faith, and he said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. So he was certain, he was 100% on that time that, he can go with Jesus anywhere he will go, and even into death. That was his faith or his belief on that time. But Jesus rebuked him, and he said in verse 34, or let's start in verse 33. But he said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. In verse 34, then he said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me. So what was the reason why Jesus prayed for Peter, and what was the reason why Jesus said these things to Peter? So the reason was Jesus knew about about Peter denying Jesus 3 times. So Peter believed that he can go wherever Jesus will go, and he can die whatever the ways Jesus will die. But on this particular passage in verse 35, Jesus told him that he is going to deny him 3 times before the cock crows. So Jesus knew that he will deny him 3 times, and so Jesus prayed for him. So he lost his faith on that certain point when he denied him 3 times. But then Jesus prayed for him, and so he was able to restore his faith in Jesus. So Jesus said, when you restore your faith, when you were able to restore your faith, strengthen also your brethren. Why he needs to strengthen his brethren? Because they are going to face a lot of persecutions. So he needs to strengthen his brethren. So the reason why he prayed for Apostle Peter, the reason why he said to him, strengthen your brethren, is because of the persecutions that they are going to suffer. Well, taking this in consideration, Jesus did not pray only for Peter, but he prayed also to the other disciples. And here are our passage. Christ prayed also for the other disciples in John chapter 7 verse 9. I pray for them, I do not pray for the world, but those whom you have given me, for they are yours. In verse 15, I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you should keep them from evil one. In verse 20, I do not pray for this alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their words. So in those passages, the word them, he was referring to his disciples. He was referring to his disciples, and so he prayed to his other disciples. And in verse 20, he was also referring to those people who will believe in him through his disciples' words. So he did not pray to Apostle Peter only, but he prayed to all his disciples and to all those people who will believe in him through them. So that is not enough passage to support the supremacy of Apostle Peter. If you are going to use it to support the papacy or the supremacy of Apostle Peter, it should be in the context. We should find it in the context, but no, that's not the context are telling us to. So did Jesus make Peter the leader of the apostle and the whole church? Did Jesus really make Peter as the leader amongst the apostle and the whole church? Well, Jesus is silent concerning Peter's primacy. In Matthew chapter 19 verse 21, when he speaks about 12 thrones, he did not mention about Peter being the Pope. He did not mention the office of Peter being supreme or as a Pope to all the churches. In John chapter 7 in verse 15, when Christ sent the apostles out, he made not mention of Peter's authority over the apostles. He should have said this, Peter, you shall be my vicar, and all men shall obey you and your successors, and your words shall be law. But we couldn't find that in the Bible. Luke chapter 22, Jesus forbade apostles to exercise authority over other Christians. If that's the case, then Jesus did not preserve Apostle Peter to be his vicar or to be his representative here on earth. What the Bible has to say, Acts chapter 15, Peter was not looked as the head of the church at the Council of Jerusalem. He was not regarded as the Pope at the Council of Jerusalem. And in Acts chapter 11, the church in Jerusalem contended with him. When he went to Cornelius and taught to him and preached them about the gospel and he baptized them, the church in Jerusalem, they are contending, they're against him about him going to the Gentiles, because they are trying to preserve their belief of circumcisions. So they were trying to contend with Apostle Peter. And so Apostle Peter reported to them. So if Apostle Peter was the Pope on that time, or he is a supreme apostle in his time, then they should have not contended with him, and he has no responsibility to report to them. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 11 to 21, Apostle Paul opposed Peter to his face. If we are to teach about him being Pope and he is infallible, then why is it that Apostle Paul rebuked him about what he did? And Apostle Paul rebuked him. So if he was the Pope, or he has the supremacy of authority among the churches, he should have clinged to what he did. Oh, I agree to what you did, Peter. But no, in front of those multitude, in front of those brethren, he rebuked them face to face. So meaning there is no special office among them. He even regarded them as hypocrites. So if he was infallible or preserved from errors, then Apostle Paul shouldn't have rebuked him. In Galatians chapter 2, verse 9, James, Cephas, and John esteemed as pillars. So these three apostles are the pillars of the church. So if Apostle Peter was the Pope, then he should be the only one regarded as the pillar of the church. But no. Paul is also silent about Peter's primacy. If he was the Pope, then Apostle Paul should have mentioned it on his epistles or on his teachings. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 20, the church was built upon all the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ being the chief cornerstone, not Peter. In the 1 Corinthians, Paul rebuked the church saying, I am of Peter. If Peter had been Pope, he would have shown care in such condemnation. Oh, okay, listen to Peter. Do not listen to Apollos. Do not listen to me. Listen to Peter, because he was the vicar. He was preserved from errors. But no, he rebuked the people. Why do you have to divide yourself? Saying, I am of Peter, I am of Apollos, I am of Paul. So he rebuked them of this idea, having this divisions among themselves, which is not good. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 28, when God appointed certain responsibilities, wherein Apostle Paul said on his writing that God appointed apostles in the church, God appointed prophets in the church, God appointed teachers in the church, and the miracles. He did not mention about papacy, or he did not mention about Pope in this particular passage, wherein God is appointing someone or responsibilities in the church. So if Pope was supported by the Bible, then we should have read it in this particular passage. No mention in all his letters about the papacy of Peter. So if Peter was a Pope, then the Christians or the preachers before should have preached about him being the head of the church. But no, Apostle Peter wasn't the head of the church. That's why Apostle Paul taught in the Ephesians that the head of the church, or Colossians, the head of the church, it was Christ, not Apostle Peter. And Peter himself is also silent about his papacy or primacy. Acts chapter 2, when he started preaching about the gospel, he should have said to all the peoples, or to all the people around them, and said, men and brethren, these men are not drunk. Hear me. I am the Pope. Hear me. I am the vicar of Christ. I have the authority to tell you this. But no, he started telling Jesus Christ persecutions, how they persecuted Jesus Christ. In 1 Peter and 2 Peter, he did not mention any of his office. He did not mention about his primacy on his two epistles. So if he was the Pope, then he should have mentioned it, that I am supreme, I am the leader of the apostle. But no, he did not regard himself as the leader of the apostle. He regarded himself as equal to them. He did not address his letters as Peter, the Pope of Christ, or the Vicar of Christ. No. And also, there's no enough evidence showing that Peter ever in Rome. There was no enough evidence. Even if he was bishop, it would not prove his supremacy. They're all bishops. The elders are bishops. That is just one office, one responsibility of being an elder. So even if he was bishop, that wouldn't prove his supremacy. So the Bible is silent. Jesus Christ is silent. Apostle Paul is silent. Peter himself is silent about his primacy. So the claim to papal infallibility is based upon four assumptions, as what I told you earlier. First, that Peter had the primacy over the other apostles. The first pope, that Peter was prominent in the early days of the church, no one can deny. And that he had the authority over the other apostles. But it cannot be proven. Examining the Bible, it cannot be proven. Second, that Peter was Bishop of Rome. Well, no reliable historical proofs that he was ever in Rome. There was no enough reliable proofs. And third, that Peter passed on the bishops of Rome his powers. That we have, the fourth one, that we have a true line of successions from Peter to the present Roman bishop. There have been countless anti-popes arise in their church history. If we are going to itemize them, or if I'm going to show them to you, there's a lot of anti-popes from within their church. And also, there is this one time, two men simultaneously claimed that they were the Pope of Christ. So, if Apostle Peter passed his power to a certain person, how come there are two persons claiming that they are the vicars of Christ? Upon scrutinizing the words of the Bible, or the words of God, which is the Bible, three things have been proven. First, Apostle Peter wasn't a pope. There was no evidence that he was a pope in the Bible. Second, Peter do not have a successor. And third, the bishops of Rome will not be his successor. So those are the three things that we have proven upon scrutinizing their dogma about the papacy of Apostle Peter. Upon consulting the Bible, we cannot find a reliable passage that testify or proves the papacy of Apostle Peter. So this is how we study the words of the Bible. We need to learn from the context. We need to learn and study the other passages for us to be precise on what we are teaching. If we are going to base on a certain man being regarded as infallible without consulting the Bible, then start asking ourselves. This is not to demerit or discredit our friends, but this is just for the sake of study, because we want to be sure in our salvation. We need to be certain on those things that we are teaching and we are following. So when it comes to religions and faith, always ask, what does the Bible say?
Open the eyes of my heart, Lord. Open the eyes of my heart. I want to see you. I want to see you.